Morning, everyone. My name's Chris Johnson. I'm the head of corporate and commercial at Johnson & Boon. Today, we're going to build on the last session in which we did around what is the right company structure for you as an individual or if you're moving into a business. Today is from momentum into structure, so from ideas into actual corporate governance. I'm just going to share my screen now so that we can see the presentation. Can everyone see that?
Passing through yet, Chris?
Let's see. How about that?
Yeah, there we go.
Excellent. So, as I say, in this session, we're really going to focus on moving from as a founder, as a business owner, and a lot of you guys are on the call and who are listening to this remotely. You're not only building a career with EXP, but you're building your own business, and this really is to give you some ideas of once you start from the initial positive outset of an idea, what are the fundamentals that you could look at. Now, I'm a lawyer. Everyone says lawyers are boring. We prevent growth with a business prevention department, all that good stuff. But there is a real narrative that we need to get into everyone, that if you do it once and well at the start, it really does save you money in the long run and actually allows your business to grow in a much more coherent way and prevents arguments within the company, which can sometimes be quite dangerous and catastrophic. So, ideas to foundations. Why does it matter? I'll give a brief overview of that. But what we find, particularly as lawyers, is that founders are really driven individuals. They've got an idea, they've got a plan, they're going to execute that plan, and they actually want growth to go from 0 to 1 million. And that's great. And that really is the positive and fantastic thing about founders and entrepreneurs. They really do believe, they have no self-doubt, they do not think about the negative. And that is why they are successful. But what we try and do and temper that is that growth is by nature an instability factor. It will not, you can't grow from an idea into a multi-million-pound business overnight without there being some chaos. What we're trying to do in this presentation is give you some of the foundations, some of the tools, some of the agreements that you may wish to implement that can actually give yourself some structure. Because once you are that multi-million-pound business, growth is then an asset, isn't it? Because you've got your brand security, you've got your working systems, you're in sometimes the classic phase of too big to fail. But whilst you're building to that stage, growth is exponential, but it is a risk. And this is where governance gaps happen and things like that. So, founder versus business strategy. When you're a founder, you're in charge. No one disputes that. You bring people in, whether it's on a consultancy basis, whether it's an employee, whether it's an external agent such as your lawyers or your accountants or things like that who work for you when they're needed. But you're in control. You make the decisions as the founder, and that's great. But as you grow, it's impossible for you to make every single decision. And what we always say is this is when friction occurs. As your team grows, and this isn't a negative of your team, by the way, this is your team just actually growing with you. They will ask questions of who makes the decisions in this situation? Does every decision have to go through the founder? What happens when we make money? Especially when you've got partners in the thing, whether it's a private equity backer, whether it's shareholders, how do them funds get distributed at the fund when profit's made? And what happens when new people come in? Because normally, as you go through the growth cycle, you will get external investment. You will get new people who want to buy into the idea. And that happens. How does that happen? What happens to the original shareholders who've been there through the start, who are in the first growth phase? When you go into phase 2, 3, what happens? And the main one is the bottom bullet point there. What happens when disputes happen? Because they will. There is no doubt about that. I've never worked with any business where there hasn't been some dispute. And I'm not saying that it has to be a massive dispute, it's all over, it's a media frenzy, it's everywhere. It can happen when it's as simple as, what happens if the founder dies? What happens if someone's not there? What happens if they're incapacitated? If you haven't got a clear succession plan, if you haven't got a clear legacy plan, if you haven't got a clear matrix for authority, you then end up in a world where the business becomes paralyzed, and then disputes happen because people try to take control when they may not potentially have the authority to do so. So what are the key documents? Shareholdings and control. So as I said before, many businesses are divided based on the contribution. It can either through, and you can get your shareholding by being a part of the journey as an employee, you get shares, or you can invest in the company and take your shares in the traditional way. What happens though is when the business is set up and the founder is integral and is founders tend to, because of their nature and their personalities, we have found, they will then potentially, once it's up and running, they become bored. And that's not a negative on them. It's just not they're not completed finishes. They like the idea, they get it up and running, they're off to the next adventure, they want to move forward. What happens then if the shareholding is 90% the founder, but he's doing 1% of the work? You'll end up with a dissatisfied workforce. So if, as a founder, as you're moving through the journey, it's important to understand, like, as I legacy plan this, as I bring people in, how do I incentivize them to make this their baby, to make that it matters as much to them, particularly if you are a founder who is looking to move on and go into different businesses or grow the next idea. If you think to yourself, I love this business, but I'm not going to be in it for, the rest of my life, here's what we need to do. Let's make sure that the shareholder agreement, when we're giving these people, is the right way. Now, it can be such things as growth shares, which means that their shareholding grows as the company grows. So, it's like, in effect, index linked. Or it can be, staged and staggered or divested until a certain point in time, or a certain growth position, or a certain revenue or a EBITDA position. There's loads of ways in which we can make sure that as a founder, you're protected. But it's about making sure that we understand what's your end point, what's your exit point, what are you trying to build, where do you want to be? Because the shareholder agreement that we build for you will incentivize the people, but also protect your potential future earning potential. And that what we find is when we don't have that conversation at the start, we end up at the end point where the founder is, in effect, basically not in the business anymore. He's got a whole load of disgruntled staff. We're then trying to retrospectively put in shareholder agreements to incentivize people. People are very jaded by that, and it becomes a very entrenched position from everybody. And whereas if you do it at the start, you've got a clear idea about how you want to incentivize and how you want to reward and how you're going to dividend the profits out, it makes the transition a hell of a lot easier for everybody. And then, as I say, that's if we look at that from the ends of, these are the people who grew the business with you. Funding is normally the other big shareholder, stakeholder in any business. Now, there's many ways that you can raise capital, whether it's institutional lending, whether it's debt financing, such as loan notes, things like that, or whether it is actual full-on equity investment through either a venture capitalist or a private equity company. Every single option is a valid option and is absolutely standard business practice. But it's really key for you to understand, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, what does this money give, and what it will normally do. And most entrepreneurs do this. They go, I need this money to grow. And that is absolutely correct. And I need this money to make this business the next step. And once I get that, I'll get a bigger market share. But what it also does is it gives control of your business, whatever the percentage you give away, to another party. And that party will then have a say, whether it's a board seat, whether there's a board seat and a directorship as well as the shareholding, whether it's actually there will be restrictions within the funding agreement that prevent you from getting capital from anybody else in the future without giving them first refusal, whether they have cross option agreements on whether they can buy your shares or they get first refusal on in shares that go into the open market. There is so many different things that funding does. It's the only way to grow in most situations. It is the absolute business norm to get external investors on. All we ever say to people who do it is understand the agreement that you're signing, and also have a real frank discussion with the funder. Not so much an institutional lender, I'm talking more the private equity venture capital guys here. What is their exit strategy? What do they think good looks like? Because that then means that you can shape your business to get them out, because they might want to sell their shareholding to somebody else, a bigger private equity funds, things like that. But by making sure that your shareholder agreements and your funding agreements with these people is absolutely nailed down and you understand what is in that agreement, it helps you as a founder shape the decisions you make on your business, because whether you need to bring this money in for cash flow, whether you need to bring this money in for growth, whether you need to understand when you've got to pay that money back, what the banking covenants are on it. Make sure you speak to your lawyer about it. Your lawyer shouldn't just say to you, oh, this is the deal, yeah, everything and it's fine. They should sit down and talk to you about, look, when you get that agreement, here are the milestones in that agreement. Here's the operational impact of that. And this is what you need to build into your operating model. And we're not, by any means target operating model specialists, but there is key things in most funding agreements with external funders that give you obligations that you need to meet, and it's really important that you set your strategy around that. Governance. Now, again, I appreciate most people on the call will go, oh no, here we go, here's the lawyer again talking about risk and compliance and stopping us doing stuff that we want to do. And all I will say is, absolutely, we understand that we work in a heavily regulated country in the UK. It is without a doubt a regulated environment, particularly even for us as solicitors. We're governed by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. We have a significant amount of hoops we have to jump through every single day. But what I'm talking about here specifically isn't really wider governance or external regulators. I'm talking about your internal governance. And these documents as founders are sometimes seen as, oh God, have we got to get this? Have we got to document this? Have we got to do that? And I'm telling you, every single director I've ever represented, whether it's in an unfair prejudice petition, whether it's in a shadow directorship, or whether it's a strike off as a director, or whether it's, actually exiting a business through, M&A. If you haven't documented the decisions you've made as a business to get to that point, you are in effect exposed. And that sometimes can really be quite significant. We've got another session that we're going to do on director duties. And what I would say is that they really are symbiotic, they're hand-in-hand stuff, this. As a director, you have duties. There's statutory duties and there's fiduciary duties, and there's also common law duties. And what I would say is, if you can't show that you have met those duties through documenting the decisions you made, so if you, for example, get a funder who wants to come in as a board, or the boards who exist, now the board might be a board of one at the minute because you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder, but if you've brought in other directors around you, or shareholders have put directors on the board, you should be able to show that you've discussed the reason why you're taking the money, that you're a solvent business and that you need the money, why you made it, and then that should be documented through a resolution. And that means that if anything ever comes back retrospectively, and it does, of why did you make that decision because it affected X, Y, and Z in the future, you can say at the time, we made the decision in good faith, and here are all the documents that say it. And that really gives a lot of weight in any company proceedings that go on in the future. So it really is important. I can't stress it enough. Board decisions and how you make your decisions and the processes of it are really key. But there are also internal documents that are really useful, because most people will come to work, you will employ them, their role will come in as a certain level, they will progress, they will develop because they're great at what they do. But it's up to you as an owner to sometimes sit back and go, right, okay, well, what is their role now? Is their role the same as what I brought them in at? No. Well, how's it developed? What are the responsibilities I want them to take? Because that then gives you a yardstick to measure that person's progress against. And that gives you as a business some structure to say, look, here are the key roles in my business. They all know what they're responsible for. And that is sometimes liberating for founders and entrepreneurs because it takes that weight off them. They will be doing jobs that really they've employed people to do. And it's about actually documenting it on paper and saying, that's your responsibility. And we're going to measure you against that. The flip side of it is most people who get roles and responsibilities documents actually really actively engage with that because they can see, look, I can measure and see what good looks like again. And I'm confident I can hit that. So making sure your roles and responsibilities match the business that you've currently got are great. But as your business evolves, don't just leave them in a drawer. Take them back out, reassess them. And again, Johnston Boon, we can help you with that stuff. As part of the EXP experience, we're happy to help. And as I said there, delegation of authority. This really factors in and is parasitic of the roles and responsibilities. If you're giving someone a role with some accountability, there should be a level of authority that's delegated to them. You cannot make every decision. The big ones stay on your desk and they cascade down, but you can't be, approving. If you're running a bigger entity with 4 or 5 layers, you can't be on the 5th layer authorizing holidays. That's got to be delegated. What it is subjective to you what you delegate, but it really is important that you give people delegated levels of authority if you are in a bigger business. That then gives you operational control, and that operational control is really wrapped up in the value of your business. If you're looking to exit, and we'll do a whole section on how you exit your business and get your business ready for sale, because I appreciate this is a journey that we're taking you on from a legal perspective. But if you get the governance right now and you get the right structures in place with the right roles and responsibilities, and that means that you are a much more attractive proposition to somebody who's coming to buy your business than if you are in effect a bit of a Wild West, because they will say, instead of us buying a business that we can lift and shift, we can lift it, but we've then got to put our own people in at our cost, and they will knock that cost off your sale price. That is a fact. So protect and value. Now, this is, again, a wider conversation. It's such a bigger point, that I could do a whole 2 sessions on this, which I probably will build it out. As a business, as you grow, your idea is your USP. You're building out your own, as part of the EXP brand, you're building out your own personal brand, which is going to be localized to your region, and as I've seen when I've been to the EXP talks myself, you build out a personal brand that spreads sometimes internationally. What's important for you though is to protect the individual brands. EXP protects their brand, you protect your individual brand, and that therefore creates value. That value is what is in effect intrinsically linked to the sale and value of your business. Your data, now the data that you work with EXP is EXP's data, but you will be building your own data sets, you're building your own customer relationships, and in effect building the suite, and it's a common term, the intellectual property of your business. You have to make sure that IP is protected. It's not, people think, oh, no one would ever use this, no one would ever want this. As your business grows, people will use your brand and put it on their own material to promote their own brand. That is a fact. And that is therefore a theft of your intellectual property. But if you haven't protected your intellectual property, it's not theft. And it's really that simple. And it's also important to make sure that, when we're building these documents in which we're saying your roles and responsibilities, are your employees locked down into the right contracts? Have they got the right restricted covenants in their contracts? Have they got, the right confidentiality clauses in their contracts? Because that, again, prevents them from lifting and shifting your fantastic idea, your fantastic business, your customer relationships, your data, and taking it and putting it up and starting up next door. All of these things need to be locked into your contracts and make sure that your business is really solid. Now, restricted covenants, etc., can't be onerous. They can't prevent them from trading, but they can protect your business. And and again, we always say to clients, when we come into your business as it's growing, let us look at every stage of this. Let us look at all these documents, because again, 90% of them might be right. But what we tend to find is people who come in, for example, as a salesman, and then by the time they're leaving, they're a commercial director, they're still on the restricted covenant of a salesman, whereas the commercial director obviously has so much more access than that salesman did when he first come. But when he leaves, his restrictions are limited to that. And that therefore creates a risk to your business and a risk to your value. Okay. So what are the key considerations? I appreciate I've talked a lot and I've kept you on. Ownership is key. Who is in charge? Ownership becoming clear. Control becomes contested. What happens? How do we fix it? What's the resolution matrix? Risk becomes difficult to manage if you haven't got operational structures. Those three bullet points are really what we try and say to people. Who's the owner? How is it structured? How is control delegated? How is control managed? And how do you manage risk as a business? And if you can document that and you can show that to us or to an external funder or to any business institutional lender, you will be on a great footing to be able to say, look, invest in my business because I can give you this value. As I said there at the bottom, a well-structured business does not just scale, it scales with control, clarity, and confidence. And when you do those three things, you will add more value to your sale price. That is a guaranteed. So that's all I wanted to talk to today. Again, as I said in the session, there are breakout sessions that we can do. The whole point around director duties, around what you do in an unfair prejudice petition claim, all of these things we can talk about as separate sessions. But I just wanted to really start this journey from, we talked about in the first session, what's the right business structure for you to take. If we do move into a limited company, which we have done here, what is the best way to set that up and what are the risks, and try and tackle them from a foundational point of view. And then as we move in, we'll move into more things which are people and contracts and things like that, which I'll talk about in the next session. There's a picture of me, not my best picture, but it's there. There's all my links. This document will be in the library if anyone wants to. And if anyone does have any questions, either now or after the session, I'm more than happy to take them on email or give me a call and we can chat it through. But thank you very much.